Hello and welcome to another evening of frank conversation here on Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. I'm Maokwe Ogunyusuf. A keen following of the news shows already that the calculations for 2023, Nigeria's general election year, are already in full swing. Just yesterday, former Vice President and flag bearer for the major opposition party, PDP, in the last general elections was in Port Harcourt to mend fences with the governor of Rivers State and had this to say.
I came here to consult with the governor, on party affairs and how we can ensure there is unity and stability of our party so that we can take over government in 2023. I believe Nigerians can't wait for 2023 to come so that PDP will return.
But if 2023 is far away, let's bring it closer. Now, last week in Lagos and Ogun State, the APC-led government consolidated their hold on the local politics in their state when they conducted local government elections. As is the custom with elections at that level, the party won all the local government seats.
APC won all the local governments. All 20 local government chairmen are APC.
Well, tomorrow, the APC will be conducting congresses as it prepares its structure for upcoming polls. And so it would seem that our politics have become all about elections and the shenanigans that accompany them. The question is, how do we keep the focus on development, which ought to be the end game of politics? How do citizens make the politicians and their policies work for them? Organizing in the civic space is the thrust of our conversation tonight. And our guest is Ambassador Godknows Igali, a public servant, diplomat, author, and scholar. Ambassador, welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you very much.
Well, if you look at how little trust now there is between politicians and the electorate, given the deficit of promises made and that fulfilled, how do we begin to get our electorate to trust in the process once again?
No, I don't think our electorate don't trust in the system at all. Our electorate still has confidence in the fact that there are a lot of good people who are out there at different levels that have presented themselves for service. There may be others who are totally an aberration and create a very bad, put a big scar on what the political class should be. But I can say generally that Nigerians have not lost total confidence in the political process and in the political class.
Well, there are big questions on that. If we're even to take, say, local government elections, and we've seen a number of local government elections being conducted in recent times. Recently, it's out of Lagos and Ogun State. And it would seem that one of the issues raised by a lot of civil society organizations was voter apathy. At the local level, where you should see a lot of participation, a lot of act, because it's supposed to be closest to the people, what you see is a lot of indifference. I mean, because the results are always the same anyway. The political parties at the government in power at the level of the state make sure that all of the seats returned are for their political party. And sometimes this creates despondency for a number of citizens. They don't want to come
Absolutely.
out. So at that level, how do we begin to say, no, things can change and think that things will change? How do we begin to get citizens interested, at least in politics at the local level?
Well, politics is also a game that is defined by change. There is no political structure that lasts forever. And that is what people should always realize, that a particular given political power that holds the sway in a given space will not stay forever. And it is continuous citizen action, continuous action by citizens. It may appear, for example, we've seen what has happened in the last local government elections in the states controlled by the APC. They took everything, but you'll be surprised that some years ago, another party was in control. So the change that comes is through unrelenting action by the citizenry and by the population. So, for example, we saw in 2015, the PDP was in government at the center, and somebody said, PDP will rule Nigeria forever. That statement was made.
For 60 years, I think
For
it said.
60, yeah, I understand. 60 years is about the lifespan of, by the time you become an adult and you become political, let us say a person is 30 years and you add 60 years, the person is almost out of the system, out of the world. So when those kind of statements were made, it was actually believed by people in PDP that power can never leave us. But there was continuous citizen action. There was continuous lack of giving up, and people continued to be unrelenting. People continued to struggle to take over power. So I think the apathy at the local level, or apathy at any level, should not. There is no cause for apathy. Rather, there should be continuous re-energizing of those in the political system, those in the civic system, to see how change can come. So if, for example, you are not happy with the local government chairman, you don't give up. You continue to work, continue to work, continue to work until you take power from them.
So
and that is what I would say Nigerians should follow. You don't say my local government chairman is terrible, my representative in the House of Assembly, House of Rep or Senator is terrible, or my governor. No, you have to remain active in trying to remove that person from power. It may not happen immediately, but eventually it will happen.
You know, I'm smiling because I just remembered how you tried once to throw your hat in the ring,
yes.
and you eventually retreated into your
room. No.
You
see,
I think you didn't have the stamina for it.
I think my situation was because I came from a very conservative background. Mind you, my daytime job was being a diplomat, and for 32 years I was a career diplomat, and later I became a permanent secretary. So those are very conservative ways of living one's life. So perhaps my case is different from many people who are in the civic space, who have been active. So I wouldn't take myself as a good exemplar for people to follow.
Well, talking about the civic space, there's been a lot of conversation around that in recent times, and a lot of civil society organizations have been saying, and they have been at the forefront of trying to energize the people, to get them interested in what is happening at that level, at the level of policies, and even the politics as well. Politicians generally don't need any re-energizing because, as long as elections are around the corner, we see them, getting energetic. But around the civic space, there's been a lot of conversation around shrinking civic space. I don't know if you agree with those who say that the civic space is shrinking. Others say no. There's a lot of talk. It's just that there's very little organizing going on around the civic space. What are your thoughts on that?
It is impossible for any given political system or governments in power to shrink the civic space. The civic space exists by itself, and it is the atmosphere created by God for human beings to improve on their livelihood through the action of non-people in government. And in global history, change has always come to human society not by the effort of people who have the political power, kings or princes or presidents, prime ministers, and so. No, it has always been by the action of the people who are not necessarily in government. Change has always come by the action of people who insist that no, this is not right, this is wrong, and this is what we must do. And if you remember in global history, there was a period when for almost 400 years, slave trade was accepted as a given. But there were the abolitionists, there were people who said, no, you can't do this. You can't be trading on other human beings. And they were not in government at the time. It was only Abraham Lincoln who later came into government. But they kept saying that you can't do this. And what seemed totally impossible was one day abolished. And now nobody can openly sell another human being. We saw the same thing with apartheid in South Africa. Apartheid was almost accepted as if it would never end, and it ended. And there are so many other things. Like in the US, women could not vote from 1776. It was only in the 1920s. Women could not work. It was only in the 1920s. Some people kept asking for change. So the civic space cannot shrink. When I interact with my friends who are civil society activists, and they say civic space is shrinking. No, it's not. It cannot shrink. Once there's any effort to, in any way, attenuate, in any way, reduce the civil space, it is an opportunity for civil society actors to become more active and try to ensure, because that is always what has happened. People like Fumilayo Ransom Kuti, she was quite comfortable. People like Herbert Macaulay, he was actually the grandson of Bishop Ajayi Crowther, he was very comfortable. Or many other people like that who were advocating for Nigeria's independence. They were comfortable. Awo was very comfortable, came back from the UK as a lawyer and was very comfortable. Zeke was very comfortable, came back from America. They could have lived their lives, but they kept pressing for change. So what I can say to people who say civil society is shrinking is that it cannot shrink. This world has seen dictators of the highest degree. We have seen people who came to try to show the world that I am in charge. But eventually, what the society, what the civil society were pressing came to pass. So they shouldn't worry. Civil space cannot shrink. If somebody tries to close this way, you try to open up that way. You become more specialized, and that's what I tell people.
For a number of people,
Yes.
I think that, you know, we saw what happened in 2015. It was a build up to a number of issues kept on building, and then for a number of people, they thought that the goal was just to change government, and it felt that was where work stopped. When governments changed, then, you know, whatever it was that people were asking for will be delivered. That hasn't quite happened. The question now is, I mean, people believe that we're at that point whereby citizens ought to be engaging with government more vigorously. If we're to take the security situation, for instance, let me quickly read this, a quick infographic. 3,133 killings reported between April to June of this year alone. Of that figure, 296 of them security personnel. Now, some people were saying that this figure alone should be enough for citizens to say what is going on with, you know, with the government. Why do we have so many deaths, and why do we have very little results in terms of the security of lives and property? Why do you think we're not getting as much engagement as we ought to be getting with government?
It is terrible for people to die under such circumstances. It's terrible. And my heart goes for the families of people, whether security personnel or citizens who go through such a trauma of loved ones being killed. However, it is also incumbent for people to ask questions. It is a right. It is an inalienable right given by God to ask questions. You have to ask questions, and the questions need answers, and answers will be given. If answers are not given, you ask more questions.
Questions to who or to whom?
No, there's always the people who are in charge of different aspects of governance, and you ask the questions in a manner that does not create more problems. There's what is called I remember now what is called civic peaceful protest. A protest that can be organized in a firm but consistent and unrelenting manner to ask questions. You see, the point I'm making is questions must be asked, and it is questions that change human society. If people give up, like you said earlier in your own introduction, when democracy came, even from 1999, people went to sleep. Oh, now everything is okay. No, you have to keep asking questions, because human society, what defines human society is continuous change. And that change can only come when questions are asked and answers are sought to the questions.
Ambassador, let me quickly take you up on agitations. You have said people should ask questions in a way that doesn't cause more problems. But in the experience of a number of people, they will say that, you know, peaceful engagement rarely yields good results. You take the example of unions, who oftentimes have to resort to strike actions before their demands are listened to. Take the example of one which you were very much involved with, agitations in the Niger Delta, which eventually got violent before government eventually paid listening ear. The question is, do agitations have to get to a certain head before government takes action? Why has that been our own? Why has that been our own experience?
Well, we also have to benchmark what we are doing with a number of global experiences. When the very serious human rights abuses were the United States of America, people like Martin Luther King came out and kept agitating. They kept protesting. They kept marching. They kept with their very firm civic activities. Eventually, they succeeded. Sometimes violence comes in, and they're inevitable. But on a normal civic situation in a country, it is non-violent protest that brings the results. You have to keep talking. You have to keep talking and debating. You have to keep demonstrating. Mm-hmm. Yes, the security people have their jobs to do. They try to stop them from doing what they are doing. Some will sometimes get overzealous, foolishly. I say foolishly because there's no need to get overzealous. What people are protesting against most times is for the common good of everybody. But in every country, we see that people achieve what they achieve through continuous efforts in speaking to the authorities. The authorities may not listen at certain times, but eventually they will listen. And you've seen recently there were some efforts by the National Assembly to pass certain bills that deal with people's ability to communicate. And Nigerian civil society came up and said, no. And eventually they were dropped. Now, if they went to sleep and said, oh, they will not do anything, then nothing would have passed.
I want to ask you about this because the Niger Delta situation keeps coming up in a number of instances. It has bred a number of other copycat situations, and oftentimes people make references to the Niger Delta. In terms of response, what government response should be. Now, in terms of banditry, people are saying that bandits should be given amnesty. And then when you also look at, I don't know, the warped mentality that, you know, stealing things that ordinarily should belong to everybody, like stealing electricity cables, vandalizing rail lines, lamp posts, CCTV cameras that are supposed to be for the protection of the masses. People appropriating those things for themselves and thinking it's their own share of the national cake. Do you think that our response to the Niger Delta crisis is what is really biting us on the bum? With benefit of hindsight, do you think we could have handled it differently?
Not at all. Not at all. The Niger Delta situation was a situation over control of the resources of a people. A people resources are based on their own territory. They don't see the benefits. They don't see adequate attention being given to it. And there was a citizen reaction to it. And as a matter of fact, the Niger Deltas did government a big favor by accepting to douse the tension and accepting to do what was happening, because at the time, if you remember, oil production came to 800,000 barrels a day instead of the 2-point-something million that was going. But for the sake of the entire nation, people had to stop that to get the attention of the authorities. Now, bandit, and mind you also, in the Niger Delta situation, not one person was killed, not one person died. They did not hurt anybody, they did not harm anybody. It was an economic situation. They sabotaged the economy of the country, and the country could have suffered. But eventually they responded by listening to the voice of reason. These other situations are situations of criminality that does not have any meaning, where people go to kidnap hundreds of school children in their classroom, where people go to vandalize electricity cables and then turn them into all hangars and all kinds of commercial items, where they go to take rail lines and turn them into, they process them to use them for some wares. Those are outright economic sabotage. So the Niger Delta situation was not, cannot be in any way compared. In terms of giving amnesty, to criminals, an amnesty to people that are agitating for the resource-based, right? All over the world, it's accepted.
Well, if you look at how that has panned out in the Niger Delta and what it has further bred, I mean, the rent-seeking economy it has bred in the Niger Delta, do you think that we could have handled it differently?
What do you mean rent-seeking economy?
Well, we have seen what has happened. I mean, look at what happened with the investigations around NDDC in recent times, and how money is made for people that should...
NDDC had nothing to do with the Niger Delta agitation. NDDC is a body that was created to develop the area, created from Abuja, but controlled often from Abuja.
If we're to look away from that and look at the general conversations around the Constitution, you've done lots of work on nation building and formation. I'm wondering whether this is just whether you're satisfied with the conversations that happened around the Constitution and whether you were happy with the sort of organizing among citizens to bring whatever it was a thought to bear on rewriting the Constitution or remaking or amending the Constitution.
Well, constitutions are made by people, free and open negotiations, and they arrive at what they think should keep them together. Let me tell you, there's no nation in this world that came cast in iron from heaven. Every nation in the world is a creation of human beings. Every other nation is still work in progress. Every other country, state. Now, in the case of Nigeria, we came together in 1914. And from after the Richard's Constitution, the British realized that we are different people. Well, they knew from 1914, but they realized more that this country needed to talk among themselves. They shouldn't make constitutions for us. So they called what is called the Ibadan Conference in 1951. And that was after what is called the Macpherson Constitution. They now allowed our fathers, our founding fathers, to talk among themselves without British intervention. So from 1951 up to 1959, our fathers negotiated a constitution, a negotiated constitution. Like I told you before, nations come together and negotiate how they stay together. So in 1951 to 59, they negotiated a constitution. So I think the conversation now is the fact that there's a major departure from what was negotiated by our fathers as a condition precedent for staying together. I don't know if you have following what I'm trying to say. 51 to 59, the founding fathers of this country who knew until today know better than us, Zik, Awo, Sadwana, and the rest, Dapabri, all of them, to the Nauru, they negotiated something and said, oh, for a diverse country like us, let us keep like this. The military came, put it aside, came up with all kinds of experiments, and now what we have in 1999 is what the military handed over to us.
So the question is, were you satisfied with the level of organizing you saw, as we try to write or amend what it is that we have as our Constitution?
No, I think that is where the dilemma arises. The dilemma arises because there's something that our fathers, who knew this country better than us, and who still know better than us, who was also liberal-minded. They said, well, yeah, we may be diverse, but let us agree to stay together. So they wrote something, and when the military came in 1966, they put it aside. 1979, they said, well, let us do it this way. They didn't bring back what our fathers agreed. I did a lot of study on national integration. My PhD is on national integration. And I see that for most countries, the way to integrate together is elite consensus. Let the leaders agree that we want to live together happily, peacefully, for the sake of our children. Number two is for them to agree on the things they've agreed, to say, let's keep these things together. So what we may need to do, we need to look at what our fathers agreed. And as much as possible, because these people thought through these things for 9 years, not in a capricious, whimsical manner, you just put things aside and say, this is what you should take. No, think through them and see the good things. And if things have changed, let's now debate on the things that have changed.
Thank you for coming on Hard Copy, Ambassador Godwin Zigali.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's our program tonight. We thank you for your generous feedbacks on our program last week. And if you'd like to be a part of the conversation this week, please use the handles showing on your screen. Thank you for watching. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf. Good night.